So I'm happy to welcome you to our second panel for the day, focused on system engineering modernization. I'm Tom McDermott. I'm the Deputy Director and CTO of the SERC, and I'll be moderating this panel. And so we have three distinguished panel members and plus a host for this. And we're focused on how system engineering has to evolve when you look at terms like continuous competition and development. You look at terms like speed of relevance and things like that in the space. And so, and you look at things like digital transformation. So we're seeing quite a shift, not necessarily in the basics of system engineering, but in the way we practice it with respect to government and industry on defense programs. And so as we go into this, I'd like to introduce the panel members. So we're hosted in this panel by Ms. Nadine Geier. She's the Director of System Engineering within the Department of Defense Office of the Deputy Secretary for Engineering. She manages the department's overall efforts to implement modular open systems approaches and systems engineering modernization across the DoD and other government agencies. She's also the government program manager for the SERC. So she's our boss from the government side. She has more than 30 years of experience working with DoD and industry acquisition programs in the areas of explosive ordnance neutralization and disposal tool development, nuclear weapon systems management, weapon system inspection and certification, systems engineering, product assurance, and other areas. She holds a Bachelor of Science degree in electrical engineering and in computer engineering, as well as a master's in business management. She's joined on the government side by Philomena, Phil Zimmerman, who's the Director for Engineering Tools and Environments within the Department of Defense Office of the Deputy Secretary for Engineering. So she has a portfolio including digital engineering, engineering infrastructure, collaboration with the Chief Information Officer, and modeling and simulation technical leadership. She's a Bachelor of Science in Mathematics from St. John Fisher College with an emphasis in computer science from Rochester Institute of Technology. Now we're joined by two industry members of the panel. Geoff Draper is a senior scientist with L3 Harris Technologies in Melbourne, Florida. He has over 38 years of experience in project and enterprise leadership roles in system engineering, software engineering, program management, and business process management. He's been active in leading and supporting numerous industry and government collaborative improvement initiatives through the NDIA Systems Engineering Division, as well as in COSI AIA and the Practical Software and Systems Measurement PSM group. Recent initiatives include the development of the measurement frameworks for continuous iterative development and what we're doing in digital engineering. And Geoff has a BS in computer science from the University of Illinois and a master's in computer science from the Florida Institute of Technology. We also have Chris Schreiber. He's a system engineering manager at Lockheed Martin Space Systems Company, leading the model-based system engineering implementation across all of the space system company programs. And he's the acting senior manager for system engineering modernization department within Lockheed Martin. He has a background in software and system engineering in the aerospace and defense and manufacturing industries. And he earned his bachelor's in finance and economics from the University of Montana and is completing his master's in computer science and system engineering from the University of Denver. So that's our panel. We have two folks from government and two folks from industry, and then I'm the academic moderator in the middle of them. As we go through this, we hope you'll have lots of questions for us as we go into this discussion. But first, I'm going to turn the floor over to Nadine, and she will talk about this system engineering modernization initiative that she owns within Defense Research and Engineering. Nadine?
As soon as I get my computer off mute, thank you. So, I sound good on paper, apparently. But I appreciate everybody coming to this group and talking in this panel. I hope to have a very fruitful discussion today. So I'm leading up an effort as part of the Undersecretary of Defense for an SE modernization update for the systems associated with it. Now, what that means is we want to modernize, as you can tell, the modernized systems engineers to support the delivery of capability to mission needs. That is a fairly generic statement. And what we've interpreted this to mean is we want to provide the tools for engineers and program managers to implement systems engineering practices, and they're uh, putting out weapon systems. So there is a lot of work going on right now in various what we call focus areas. There's agile developments, there's digital engineering updates, there's modeling and simulation updates, just to mention a few. But there's nothing that puts all of that together into one system with an approach of how do you utilize all these different new tools coming out to have the best chance for success in developing your project. So that is what we're trying to develop right now. We're trying to put out modern ST practices that maintain the essential rigor of systems engineering, but use these new tools with more confidence and more ability, so to have a better chance of success and in the shorter time frames that are going on right now of getting these tools out. I'm sorry, these systems out to the users. So we're in the very beginning stages of this effort, and we are working on uh, the details of this right now. So if we go to the next slide, please. So towards this end, um, we developed a problem statement. It's not on this slide. We developed it after we came up with this slide. But the problem statement is there's a lack of integrated approach to implementation of SE focus areas that is necessary to ensure the relevant guidance, skills, and training is available to deliver a robust, disciplined approach to weapon systems acquisition. Right now, we are in the very beginning stages of developing this modern approach. We're in the understanding the implementation stage. So we are doing a lot of research, specifically relying on best practices in all the different DoD organizations and previous research that the SERC has done in these areas, including some of the stuff that we heard yesterday um, as part of the briefings that we got, especially the demonstrations that were in the last half of yesterday. Once we come up with all the data that's out there, we are going to review it and figure out what we can utilize, what still needs to be developed, and what needs to be further developed, like it's already partially developed and we need to get it further down the road, and what needs to be developed from scratch, which I'm basically calling a short-term, medium-term, and long-term strategies associated with systems engineering and the systems engineering modernization. So as soon as we come up with these strategies, we will be putting information out as soon as it is developed for best practices and a body of knowledge. After we put out what we were able to find, we are going to identify what areas still need to be developed, and then work on a plan of action for those. And at the end of this, and and part of an ongoing activity, we are going to be putting out as part of a modernization strategy and a body of knowledge everything that we've learned as we learn it. So it won't be perfect, but it will be there for folks to use because people are going through, um, people are needing this knowledge now. They're going through, they're developing programs now. So I do not want to wait till things are perfect to get it out there. I want to get things out there as soon as we're able to. So just recently, we were able to bring in the Tom McDermott from the SERC on this project with us, and he's a very welcome addition to this effort. And we will be going forward with this and putting out some more information on this in 2022. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it back over to Tom to go and start the panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nadine. So I'd like to first just turn it over to opening comments from our panelists. Geoff, if you don't mind, we'll start with you.
Sure. Thank you for the invitation. I guess I resonate with a lot of the content that Nadine showed on her slides, in particular this one. I think the focus areas on the left are also focus areas that we, in my company and also across industry, are embracing and working on transitions for digital engineering, MOSA, software engineering, and so on. I want to focus a little bit on the part in the middle, which is the key partnerships of government, industry, and academia. I've been involved with the NDIA System Engineering Division, as Tom mentioned, for about 20 years. And part of the mission of that division is really to help facilitate, help government come up with an interface with industry on effective ways to transition some of these practices into industry. So helping develop products, but also helping on the transition side. So that is something I think that I can probably talk about a little bit more and some of the past successes. I will say that on behalf of the SE division and also our counterparts in other associations like INCOSE, AIA, there's a lot of collaboration there as well, because many of our companies are representing and participating in several of those associations. So there's a lot of, I'd say, collaboration is at a high from that standpoint. I guess I'll save some of the other comments for some of the other questions that's in by ways of introduction.
Thanks, Geoff. Continuing with the industry view, Chris, any opening comments from you?
Sure. No, well, first and foremost, thanks for the opportunity. Appreciate the chance to engage in this way and talk a little bit about things that are near and dear to my heart. So like Geoff, I'm coming from both a company point of view with Lockheed Martin at Space Systems and at a corporate level within Lockheed Martin, as well as the NDIA Systems Engineering Division right now. I'm a vice chair for that. Geoff has held a vice chair for that in years past. He's been with the NDIA longer than I have, but certainly these are things that are acutely being focused on from an industry perspective. And I know that we're going to get into challenges and pain points and things like that, and some of the discussion here. And I welcome that, because that's I guess that's reflective of the journey that we're taking, and the fact that we're having challenges means we're actually trying to implement this thing, which is great. So again, thank you for the opportunity. All of these things are really important to industry, especially as we try to address the challenges that have been talked about, here, as well as, the reasons for the strategy that Nadine's talking about that we need to try to implement. So appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks, Chris. And Phil, any opening comments from you?
Yeah, like Chris and Geoff, I appreciate the opportunity to be on this, and I am extremely grateful that the Department of Defense has decided to initiate this. For at least the past 3 years, digital engineering has wanted to be at the bottom in terms of providing foundational leg up to all other types of engineering and technical practices. And the focus that Nadine and her team have on modernizing how we do our systems engineering job, because we have all of these other things that systems engineering can stand on, of which digital engineering is just one element of it, I think finally puts the focus on modernization in the right spot. So I'm grateful to Nadine and her team for lining this out and standing by for challenging questions, because I know that's what makes the ideas and the path stronger. Thank you.
Thanks, Phil. So the first question for the panel, and Chris mentioned this. So what are the biggest challenges for the discipline of system engineering as related to emerging trends like digital transformation, speed and agility, and these other factors that are emerging today?
Well, I can start. I think the challenges you see in DoD are very similar to the challenges we face in industry. I think there's a lot of cultural inertia. I've heard a lot about culture in the discussions in the last couple of days. I think that's a challenge not only in government but also in industry. So it's developing not only some of these we know the right answer, but getting that implemented is difficult. So it's the training, it's the processes, it's the the deployment, it's getting people to think that we're not doing 2167A anymore. Getting willing to do things differently. So I think those are very common challenges across government and industry.
Yeah, I think maybe to expand on that too, from my point of view, I think of it in kind of three terms, having tried to stand up that practice at Lockheed Martin a while ago. So, from a people, processes, and tools point of view, from a people point of view, I think we're still dealing with the dichotomy of having a lot of leadership within programs from an industry side. Just getting familiar with the modern practice, right? So you have folks trying to implement the practice, and you have folks that maybe don't understand it as well, because when they grew up within the program or within their particular company, this is a new practice. So trying to understand and adjust to that new practice. From a process point of view, I think we're implementing a digitized process in a lot of ways. But we still need to reinforce the why are we doing the modeling in the first place. If we do it in a model-based way, you may only get to the wrong answer quicker if you don't understand the why you're doing the things that you're doing. So we need to kind of constantly reinforce that why. And then from a tools point of view, I think it's the traditional tool problems. It's dealing with challenges around infrastructure, right? Is that government owned? Is it contractor owned? If contractors have subcontractors, how are they merging their tool environments? How is that all working? Being able to make those tools compatible where we're using different tools. And certainly we can get into some of the ways that industry is trying to influence standards in order to make that better with language changes. But really, from people, process, and tools, from all three of those dimensions, we're seeing challenges. And I would say we shouldn't be, I guess, discouraged by that, because it's not like we don't have good examples of other engineering practices that have gone through exactly the same thing, and it's not like they all failed, right? We don't call it model-based mechanical engineering today, and there's reasons we've advanced. So I think we can learn those lessons and hopefully get there quicker in the systems engineering world.
Well, Chris kind of stole my thunder. Thanks, Chris.
Sorry.
I think that I was going to put it perhaps a little bit, maybe a little bit more bluntly. I think systems engineering is suffering from a bit of an identity crisis. And I think part of that is because we who are practiced and practicing systems engineers, whether you're trained in it or not, just to us, it looks like common sense, right? And so we don't always do enough to call attention to the value that the systems engineering methods have. I also think that, as Chris pointed out with the model-based part, is it model-based systems engineering? Why isn't it just systems engineering as we advance our tools into the computational space? So I think that has a lot to do with it. So I'm really excited about the modernization of systems engineering, because I think it's gonna bring it again to the forefront in engineering thinking, and through the process of the modernization, cause people to think about what does it really mean to do systems engineering, and what is systems engineering really. So I'm excited for this because I think the visibility that systems engineering is going to get as Nadine takes at least the DoD portion through this modernization, I think that visibility is going to do our community a lot of good. Over.
Thanks all. So to follow up, it's always kind of confused me because system engineering in major product development and system engineering and software engineering and agile development and system engineering and lean manufacturing and system engineering and modeling and simulation, they've always just been system engineering to me, but they've grown up around different discipline areas and tool sets and methodologies as you go forth. And so kind of following up, particularly with what you said, Chris, how are we bringing the communities together to work towards one view of these processes?
Well, I think.
Go ahead, Chris. Sorry.
No, that's all right. We're going to step all over each other.
Yeah.
Sorry, Geoff. Well, I mean, I think there's a variety of ways. Geoff spoke to some of them in his opening remarks, right? But there's, there's engagement in industry in collaboration with academia and with the government on a number of different things. But whether you're talking MOSA or you're talking digital engineering, specifically model-based systems engineering, or any of the other ones, it all starts with having a common language and establishing that common language so you can build off of it. And I think in those groups, whether it's through the digital engineering working group or the DEXWIG, the Digital Engineering Information Exchange Working Group, or any of the other ones, the MOSWEG, I think we've come together, and I think there's been a lot of progress made on coming up with that common language so we can start. Now we can dive into, because we understand what we're saying when we speak about those things, I think now we can really dive into the challenges that we're experiencing and be more effective, because when you're struggling on what do you mean when you say, it really makes it difficult to make progress. So I think we're making strides there.
Well, Ed, I kind of like when DoD initiates standardization improvement initiatives, because it gives me some ammunition to take back to my company. I think, we respond to the customer. And so if the customer's going that direction, things that we as practitioners always knew were good for us, it's sometimes hard to get the investment and the commitment from upper management and so on. But it certainly helps if we're all pointing in the same direction. I can use one example there of, you have software engineering on the slide. I know my world was changed when the Defense Science Board came out with their software study. And so it's just another DSB report until you realize it was written into the NDAA and is legislated by Congress. Well, that's kind of a forcing function. So one example, and speaking for NDIA, we formed a working group, say, well, this is good for us. We would like to see acquisition and software transition to this space. I mean, that's something that industry had already been embarking on. And so the alignment of that with how the DoD is going to be acquiring, I think benefits us all. So I got real excited, about that. And then the Defense Innovation Board came out with their recommendations as well. So we stood up a working group to try and say, well, here's the industry's perspective on how we can make that happen, because it's in all of our best interests. And I think we see some, successful examples of that. We talked about Kessel Run yesterday. So I think software is maybe a model there that we can follow on some best practices. Tom talked this morning, for those of you who were in the digital engineering track, about digital engineering measurement. That was another activity we took on, joint between NCOSI, NDIA, PSM, government representatives for measures for continuous iterative development. I think that is one of our better examples of a very successful collaboration between government and industry. We had the opportunity to work directly with DoD, ANS, as they were shaping the software acquisition pathway. They were able to cite some of that work in their response to Congress. I think that's how this is supposed to work. So, I think the objectives that DoD has can flow through all of us in collaboration of government, industry, and academia in a similar way. I think we have opportunities.
So I'm going to write down the fact that industry actually likes it when government starts something,
Yeah.
Geoff, and I'm going to frame it and put it on my wall.
Yeah.
I think that the fact that we're all coming together is just shows that we have a common need to move forward. And so I think that it's a little bit trite, but where there's a will, there's a way, right? And we have great leadership across industry, academia, and government to try to bring these communities together. I think you succeed because of that leadership. And so I think I'm looking forward to doing this. Right? We have things that can help each other, and if we can stand on each other's shoulders, stand on the shoulders of giants, we're just going to move that much farther ahead. Over.
So Phil, this may be directed at you more than others, but I'm struck by the fact that's come up that we have a digital engineering working group, and we have a modular open systems working group, and we have an agile community of practice. And so we have these different initiatives going on still. Are we doing enough to cross-pollinate between these activities so we just have a single modernization community of practice?
Tom, I think that's a great challenge. So let me try to break it down. Are we doing enough to cross-pollinate? I don't know. I will tell you that we hear a lot from our service part. At least I hear a lot from the service partners. I'm sure Nadine has heard it as well, that we have too many working groups for people to participate in. And so therefore, they're not necessarily asking for, whose is better, Nadine's or Phil's, right? But they are saying, look, you guys have too much going on. I think that's a good and a bad thing. I think the good news is that our message for needing collaboration with industry and academia is getting out there. But I think the bad thing is that we are relying on people being in multiple groups to do the pollinization. So I'm gonna say no. I don't think we are doing enough. That being said, I think we need some creative and constructive suggestions on how to improve that. Over.
Chris or Geoff, any creative or constructive suggestions?
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Chris.
Well, I think I don't. So necessarily, because maybe I'm, one of those people that has been involved in multiple. So it's kind of that, by personal fiat that we're trying to accomplish some of that stuff. I think the intent is there, and the folks that are working these things are trying well, but I would say that maybe we're at the point you kind of need a certain amount of gravity to an issue to have to work those things, and maybe we're getting to that now, Tom, where there's enough energy around being parts of these groups and recognizing the fact that there may be overlap, or maybe that we're not communicating as well as we could potentially, and so understanding that. So maybe we're at a good time to be able to do it. I don't know that I would have said that, maybe 6 months ago or before, but I don't have any creative solutions to offer up other than identifying where we have those overlaps and making sure and forcing that communication to happen. I know things like, intellectual property and that sort of thing, those kinds of specific concerns exist in each one of those groups. And so those are good places to collaborate, but there are likely some that aren't good places to collaborate. And I think we only get there by maybe doing some inspection, but no, super awesome, simple answers from me, unfortunately.
Yeah, I agree with the IP standpoint. I mentioned the enthusiasm of industry to do the right things, for the right reasons, but IP is also, often a sticking point. And I appreciated the briefings yesterday on that. I think it, I understand, for example, delivery of source code. Well, I understand why that would be wanted from the software community to make sure you can do cyber scans on it and protect your vulnerabilities. Industry executives tend to think, well, why would I give you my source code? So I understand the motivation behind it, but there is, always this IP concern that I think that's one of the barriers and challenges we will continue to face.
Hey Tom, and let's play a little game and see how fast the rumor mill works on this one. So I am very willing, if Nadine stands up an SC modernization working group, I am very willing to query the digital engineering community and get their thoughts on what it would mean to either be a part of it or be an element of a larger working group. So if that happens, I think I want to do everything I can to show that digital engineering is a supporting element to this, right? You don't do that by standing alone. That being said, we're very proud of the fact in digital engineering that the working group is responsible for its own success. And so I'm not going to do it, just shut it down completely, but let's see what the rumor mill says. I'm willing to ask if that happens. Over.
Thank you, Phil. I just take a moment to remind folks that while it's my job to moderate this panel, it's your job to ask questions. So I haven't necessarily run out yet, but please put your questions and concerns and comments if you want into the Q&A. I'd like to maybe change the focus of what we were talking about at this point in time and just take a really broad view. And so in my 30-some years experience in systems engineering in government and industry, particularly in defense, it's primarily been focused on development of material solutions for the warfighter. And so it has this product/platform mentality associated with it. What we're asked to do when we look at mission engineering and digital engineering and agile and all these other things is start to train our thinking from that to capability definition and capability release to the warfighter. And so it's at least a different mindset in the community, and maybe drives practices to a very different place in the space. And so, I would ask around that in that context, is there a future state of system engineering that we arrive at, and maybe what are some of the key elements of that?
Well, the one thing I can cite, and Tom, you can talk this better than I can, is the NCOSI SE Vision 2035, which I at least the drafts that I've seen are pretty effective in establishing a vision for where system engineering is going in the future. Some, where are we with regards to our deployment of some of those now, and what can we aspire to in the future? So I think that is one of the best articulations that I've seen on a future of where the system engineering is going.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, well, first and foremost, what we do with this transformational way that we execute our systems engineering process, it needs a little bit of time to be to the point where there's not friction there, right? It needs to do things better, and it needs to be quicker and less work than it was before to describe these systems, right? We can't have friction, otherwise we'll make zero progress. But to that end, I don't think the end in mind is just so that we can throw our systems engineering design into descriptive models. I don't think that was the point at all. And it's not the point that's articulated in any of the vision that's coming out from either NCOSI or from government. So I think the trick there is, we need to connect our descriptive models to analysis and optimization much more, because that's the holy grail of it, right? That's the reason we're doing this, is to leverage the power of computers when turned toward our engineering designs in a way that allows for us to either analyze our design to see how much quality it has, however you define that, or to be able to optimize that design given a trade space that now we can understand better because we've digitized it in some ways. And so I think that's the future of where we need to go, is not just, pushing our practice toward being able to capture our design differently, I think it needs to leverage that captured design to do things in a more transformational way for systems engineering, which to my mind means being able to analyze that solution both in its local context and in a broader context, as Geoff said, and even tune it toward optimization, where we can understand and trade things much more quickly than we were when things were artifact based.
So I'm not nearly as thoughtful as my industrial colleagues on this one, or and probably not even as not as thoughtful as Nadine is. I want systems engineering to be on par with every other engineering discipline, and the proof to this, in my opinion, is that when I go up and I introduce myself to somebody as a systems engineer, they don't ask what it is. Right? Have you ever been in a conversation where somebody goes up and says, "Hi, I'm a mechanical engineer," and nobody asks what a mechanical engineer does? Right. So I'd like to be on par with all the other engineering disciplines. Over.
I think if you go to a recruiting site and you search for system engineering, what you're going to get is information technology systems, not the type of systems that we're talking about here. Yeah. And, so IT is one of those areas, for instance, where the system engineering discipline has transferred quite nicely and built a bunch of tools that they can use.
Yeah. Hey, Tom, Nadine's got modernization. Nadine, what do you think it looks like?
So thank you, Phil. So I've been listening, very interesting, and you said a lot of good things. So systems engineering is in everything, right? Everything that we do, electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, and all the other disciplines involves a certain aspect of systems engineering. And what's going on with these focus groups is a group will focus on how to do agile software development as part of software engineering, or a group will focus on modeling and simulation. Um, but there's nothing right now that tells them how do you put that all together to make a complete project. And that's where we need to go. We need to do the deep dives on how to do certain aspects of engineering, but we also need the overarching viewpoint of how it all goes together to get you a final product. That's what I'm trying to do with the modernization effort, and that's the direction that I think that we need to go in the DoD with systems engineering is give someone an overarching viewpoint. And Kosi put out a chart just a little while ago of how complicated systems, and especially systems of systems, are getting nowadays. It is virtually impossible without better systems to keep track of all the different aspects within that project and make sure everything is interactive, works together properly. And especially if there is a last minute change or a part of it that's going obsolete or failing that needs to be replaced, and what are the second tier and third tier effects of those things. We need intelligent programs to help us with that, and we need better systems engineering tools to be able to integrate all of that into a final product that we can put out and have confidence that it's going to work right the first time. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Yeah. So it's interesting to drill down on that. So as we move to a future where perhaps overall we're more digital and model based, and where system engineering is becoming to be a more of a recognized discipline on its own, do you think that system engineering will be driving the other engineering and computer science disciplines into do things this way versus that way?
Well, if systems engineering is just common sense, and if common sense rules, which it doesn't always do, then I think the answer to your question is yes. That being said, I think we have a long way to go before systems engineering again has the proper kudos or pedigree
You might have lost her.
Phil, I think we lost you there.
Yeah.
So you went on mute.
Well, maybe
While we're
while
waiting for
she
Phil to
comes
come back, and you know, I might live in a different world because I'm not seeing that lack of respect of system engineering. So it might be the people I hang around with, but I see it valued as a discipline already. I see that reflected in some of the DoD, you know, policies and guidance, and you know, roles and responsibilities. I see that on the bottom, you know, of the chart here, and you know, the role of the chief system engineer. So I may not be seeing the gaps in my world as much as we apparently are, where we feel that system engineering is not recognized to the extent of other disciplines.
Okay. So a question from Jeffrey Shoebrook. What are your insights into the cause of the lack of competency in foundational systems and software engineering standards like 15288, 12207, 29148, 4210? Those are all numbers, but we're talking about systems and software and architectures. I see competencies in these standards being a fundamental enabler. So any comments on that?
Well, I'm a big proponent of 15288. We've spent a lot of time working with that in both government and industry. I was glad to see, you know, in the modernization of SE standards in DoD in past years, a migration towards 15288, as opposed to some of the, you know, government-specific standards. I think several of us were able to participate in that, and the DoD extensions to it, .1, .2, and so on. That's an area where I think you had quite a bit of industry, government, academia involvement in shaping those standards. So I think, you know, we had industry input in, you know, for example, you know, technical reviews and so on. So I think those are positive steps forward. Going back and talking about, you know, transitioning that to industry. I can talk a little bit about, you know, the corporate knowledge here from NDIA, and, you know, we work with DoD on how to write acquisition language in RFPs, so we could, you know, make sure that was flowed down properly into acquisition contracts. So that was helping program offices specify it directly, industry respond directly, as well as transitioning it to industry. So we had a separate working group say, well, we know that you're used to working in CMMI. Now, you know, so let us give you, you know, we developed a matrix that kind of says, if you're used to doing CMMI, here's how that maps to 15288. And here's some of the gaps, here's what's covered, here's what's not covered, but it'll help you transition. So transition work aids like that, I think transitioning from what people are used to into what we want them to evolve into can be a useful asset.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I guess from my perspective, I don't see a gap. What I see is kind of an interrupt or a disconnect, because from an MBSE point of view, focus for a very long time has been on the artifacts, right? The products that you produced, and now that the thing that's being asked for in some cases is, you know, deliver to me your model. I want it all. And then you have to do some translation of how did you show me in all of this model-based content, the types of things that I'm used to seeing in a different way. And I don't think that's in conflict with any of those standards, right? I don't think 15288 says you have to do things only with artifacts. That's not the intent, but there is a little bit of a translation that is maybe just going to take a little bit of time to understand, that it's not such a hyper focus on the diagrams that I need to go draw, but what are the diagrams really trying to communicate, right? They're really trying to communicate the same sorts of things that we did when we were using documents before. It's just in a different way, and actually in a richer environment, because you can get all of the traceability and you can get much more depth into some of those areas with the model than you could have possibly with interpreting a document. So I wouldn't consider it a gap with some of those standards. What I think is it's a little bit of being able to translate on the fly into a different format and being able to, that we're communicating with today to understand the types of things that we're expecting out of that standardized process.
So Chris, I'll follow up with the comment that Jeffrey Schuberg made at the end of this, which is Johnny still can't write a quality requirement in my experience. You think the tools are going to help solve that problem?
Well, like I said in my opening remarks, it either makes it easier to either write good requirements or bad requirements. So you still need to understand how to write good requirements and capture that. But so I guess I can agree with Geoff, and that's part of why I say I think they're an anxiety of mine is to make sure that there's not such a focus on the language and the tool that we forget what we're doing with the questions that we're asking in systems engineering in the first place.
Yeah,
I
we heard
think
this.
maybe, Tom, I think maybe this is an opportunity for systems engineering to lead. I think that we talk, and Geoff and Chris have both spoken eloquently about collaboration across government and industry, and you know, whether it's 15288 or something else, and I'm not trying to slam 15288, but I think if we can, as government and industry, agree to work or to baseline our activities from a particular standard, then that might actually enable us to work together better, or at least with fewer obstacles, and then show the other disciplines how it can be done when you agree on something. Over.
Good.
I think writing things
ahead.
down is the easy part. You know, getting it transitioned to practice is the hard part. I mean, you know, working on practices and processes and guidelines and so on. I mean, not that that's easy, but the much harder part is what's the iceberg underneath the water, which is how to get people to do what you want. And I'm looking at some of the items in the box on the bottom, the best practices, training in the workforce, and so on. You know, falling on the 15288 discussion a little bit. I think the system engineering body of knowledge is a useful asset that tries to provide some guidance there that is widely used in industry. I'm very excited about the digital engineering body of knowledge that is being done within DoD and other partners. I think those are assets that can help people understand what's intended and give them guidance in a industry accepted standardized way.
That's good. And you know, part of what we're trying to do is augment those body of knowledges with latest emerging guidance and lessons learned in this particular project that we're doing. So Ransom Taylor asked, what efforts are ongoing to update policy documents to enable and enforce the cultural shift required for this transformation, i.e. JSIDs? And so that's actually part of why we were here today. And Nadine, you may want to comment on that.
I'm sorry, I dropped out for a second. I don't know what you want me to comment on.
Okay, so the question was, what efforts are ongoing to update policy documents to enable or enforce the cultural shift towards this system engineering modernization?
We're not anywhere near that point yet. We've got to figure out what we need to change first. So right now, the short answer is none, because we are still exploring the space and what we need to modify.
So
If anyone
I
has
also,
any suggestions,
yeah,
I'm more than happy.
Nadine, yesterday on the panel, I actually pointed out to Dennis McBride, who was working on the policy simulator, to maybe we don't need to change policy yet. Maybe we need to find out where policy doesn't stop us from doing things a certain way. I know that may sound a little underhanded. That's not what I mean. But where are the gaps? Like for the big push in digital engineering came once started people realizing that there wasn't anything that prohibited you from doing it. Over.
Right. No, I don't think that there is anything right now prohibiting us from doing a lot of stuff. In fact, we're finding out that as we just explore in the DoD and what folks are already doing, that they are already implementing changes in local cases. I want to especially credit Nav Air because we just talked about them yesterday, but the Army as well are doing things in very innovative ways that probably should be adopted on a larger scale within the DoD. So nothing's prohibiting them from going ahead and doing that. I don't think there's as far as I know of right now, there is no policy inhibiting systems engineering modernization.
Thanks. So this is a little bit different question, sort of a follow-on to that, but this comes from Stephanie Purcell. What actions is the government taking, hopefully inadvertently today, to subvert SE modernization?
Mhm.
So I don't think Stephanie's allowed to ask questions.
But you have to answer because she's our boss.
I'll let Nadine start.
Oh, thank you. So we put out a data call with a very similar language just a little while ago, asking for that information of what is inhibiting you. And honestly, we haven't gotten a lot of response in that area. But if I was to take a stab at it, I would say people just don't know what to do. They it's hard it's hard enough to do your job, right? And the task that you've been put on, to think of the broader picture of how do you transform or how do you do systems engineering. It requires a certain amount of time to really sit down and think about it and really explore what is out there that can help me do my job, and how many people have that kind of time. So I think in reality they're looking for a someone to help them with that information, some place to go. There's information all over the place in this area, and it's little pockets of information in the Army, little pockets of information in the different parts of the Navy, in the Air Force, and the Space Force, and not all of it is accessible for even other folks in the DoD, let alone outside. And then there's proprietary information in the contractor's realm of how they do things that it's not accessed by the DoD. And what I'm hoping to do in the near future is bring all this information, at least a link to it, in one location, so you don't have to spend as much time searching for it. You can just learn about it.
So Tom, I'd be interested in hearing what Geoff and Chris have to say from their, if you will, from their looking in viewpoint from industry. Over.
Well, I'll give you an opinion. I think there's a lot of value in a well-articulated vision statement. I think the digital engineering strategy is a very well-articulated vision for where we want people to go. I actually love the national defense strategy. How many times even in this last couple of days have you heard delivering capabilities at the speed of relevance? Those are sound bites that people understand what is needed. 3 years ago, who would have ever thought that we would have been looking at by now a complete rewrite of the DoD 5002 series? I think that's remarkable, and I think it reflects a willingness to change, not only a willingness but an imperative to change. Our adversaries aren't encumbered by those same processes. So I really applaud DoD in rewriting the acquisition pathway policies. I think that sets a better vision for the future. I think it provides enough flexibility to do things differently. So I'm very bullish on and it takes inspired leaders. Phil, I think you're an inspirational leader on digital engineering. I think Ellen Lord was an inspirational leader on the A&S side. So I'm very positive on the changes DoD has taken over the past few years in the acquisition pathways.
Yeah, from where I sit, I don't think I've seen any subversion necessarily. I think the challenges that we see are, because I think it's being embraced, right? I don't think it's a conversation on whether it's it's something that's expected or not. I think that's been articulated really well. I think what we see is maybe inconsistent expectation that's being flowed down through acquisition. And I don't think it's intentional at all. What I think it is just expectations and understanding are different, and they certainly are different across the services. And so when you look at an RFP, say, that's coming from the Navy versus something that's coming from the Air Force, not just the language is different, but the expectation on the execution is different. And so that's one thing that would help, I think, from an industry point of view, is if it were, I realize that it can't all be completely, synchronous, but if it could be more consistent, that would be good. I guess the second thing that would help, in my opinion, is it to need not just contractual that we're going to implement these modern approaches to the programs of record that we all interact on, but that they're collaborative as well, right? We realize that everyone is doing their best to try to get the most goodness out of taking these modern approaches, and sometimes that's going to create gray areas. But I think that's opportunity if you look at it from a different point of view, that we have an opportunity to kind of recast the way that we interact on a program of record, and in maybe a more collaborative way. And so now it's not just, give me everything in a statement of work and I'm going to deliver everything exactly to that statement of work. No, there's room for collaboration, I think, that's afforded by the approach. So I think if we're collaborative as well as contractual, I think that helps, and being more consistent helps too. But like I said, I haven't seen any overt, from the customer side where they're trying to not do anything that's in accordance with the modernization approaches.
Thanks. So there was a request for industry input, and Chris, I very much like your perspective. I think if you think about where we're struggling in system engineering modernization and related activities right now, it's figuring out how to transition from the government definition of the system to the contractor definition of the system in that space. And so it seems to work, and it's really this role of lead system integrator in the middle, who's taking on that role, and can that be a collaborative role between government and industry instead of a one versus the other in that domain. So anything that we're doing to that provides barriers in that space, I think, is really important in this modernization effort. So I think time for one more question. Roberto Hermida asked, is it possible to collaborate, standardize on what is a good requirement? But the interesting part of this question is perhaps using AI and machine learning in the future to provide guidance within model-based workflows. And so I'll turn that around and ask, maybe comment on, so what are some of the technology enablers for this modernization?
Well, maybe I'll start. So yeah, I completely agree. When you start down the journey of doing things in a more model-based way that tends to be less prosaic, right? And CHAL statements are certainly that, if nothing else. Being able to communicate them in a way that's kind of in the spirit of a model-based approach, where you're communicating a requirement in such a way that you can operate it on it from a machine point of view. I think there is opportunity, and instead of writing something with a shall that offers some opportunity to do things in a way that's more ambiguous, either with compound statements or references to other things or something that's not measurable, right? I think the parsimony of a language as applied by a modeling language really can lend itself to avoiding some of that ambiguity and really getting to the heart of what do you really mean by that. So I think there's lots of opportunity to take advantage of the modernized approaches, especially the model-based ones, in order to get better engineering product, especially requirement.
Great.
Okay.
This is Nadine. I'm going to jump in again and say something about that. So I think all of this data that we're getting in is useless unless we're utilizing it. And the only way to utilize it is to have some sort of artificial intelligence helping us make sense of all of it, because just as I stated earlier, just too much data out there for one single person, most people anyways, to break down and put with other data to make an informed decision. So I think we have to go to an artificial intelligence type system to make smart engineering decisions about the system and the system of systems, so that they will work in the battlefield with other systems and will um, work in the battlefield with other systems, and an army system will work with the Air Force system, which will work in the Navy system, to give us complete you might say OV1 approach to the problem.
Excellent.
I-
Thank you, Nadine.
Yeah, Tom, I also want to encourage people to not think about technology as things that are more complex or harder to do, or requires absolutely no offense to everybody on the phone, but requires PhD to get them done. Sometimes the technology is found by going simpler for the solution. For example, in requirements, what if for me the simple thing is, we'll quit writing them down and start modeling them. Right?
Mhm.
Is that as simple as we need to go? I don't know, but technology doesn't necessarily have to be more complex or something that's new. Over.
Yeah, the successful ones are all simplification technologies and user experience. So with that, I think we're out of time. I want to thank all of the panel members. I thank you, Nadine, for both hosting us and hosting this initiative that we're launching into. I hope you'll all stick around for the rest of the event this afternoon. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.